Okay, so that was the 6th testing sphere, which had the turret chamber and the companion cube chamber. This one was also a victim of my computer overheating. It got fixed about halfway through the turret chamber. So for the other ones, I kept to a very close outline of the original. But for this one, I messed with the overall shape a bit more just because. So the sizes of everything are all a little bit different. So the first thing of note is this hallway. I made it somehow both open and closed at the same time. Now, here I use my projected texture to shine a very strong light on the turret from the side. This is somewhat inspired by the first map with turrets in the original, or not the original, but the Portal 2 turret intro map. A fun piece of Chronos trivia. This whole section used to be 2 of these tiles to this way, but I moved it so that this would fit. This wall was certainly an experience to make and get all of the textures aligned. I removed the Ratman den here because Doug Ratman just doesn't really have much of a place in the story. I might see if I can put him somehow in the escape sequence, I don't know. So, since I built this chamber before I even started considering this because of how that didn't line up, I put these support beams here and told myself I would use them later, and I did. This specific one is holding up these lights. This one isn't holding up a whole lot other than that chamber. Here I found another wood texture that was perfect for small little bits like this. I became severely obsessed with it, and I used it too much between this chamber and the next chamber. I regret nothing. So the reason why there were a lot of cubes right here in the original map from Portal 1 was because there was a broken cube dropper here. I think I'm going to maybe remove a couple of these since it doesn't make sense for there to just be 8 cubes lying here. I don't know. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of knockback. These guys are pretty fun to take out. Every time I play through this chamber, it's always a blast. That reminds me, one interesting thing that I noticed while playtesting this chamber, because I had to play through it many times, is that it's actually entirely possible to beat it with only portals and never use a cube, or only cubes and never use a portal, with the exception of right here where there is a grate that you have to use portals to get past. But if you do it right, you can actually stack, you can put a cube on this button, and then stack cubes up here and jump over, and it's a really fun challenge to try and do either of those. And then we have our exit. For this, for these maps, I'm always trying to do interesting things with lighting. And for this one, normally you would walk on a well-lit catwalk over a dark background. However, because of the fog, the background ended up lighter than the catwalk before I bothered adding lighting. So it ended up being completely silhouetted, which I think is a really cool look, and I love how it came out. Of course, it does get lit up here, and you can see the catwalk a bit better. The companion cube. Oh, this is also using the projected texture trick from the last video. But the companion cube was a struggle. This thing almost deserves the end of the test chamber after the pain it put me through to make this level. In the original Portal, the companion cube was a single entity, a prop_physics named Box, which had the metal box model with a skin that replaced the Aperture logo with a heart. It was simple, and it just worked. However, when it came to making this, I made this very ornate design in Blender, or not ornate, something ornate probably wouldn't be this rusty, without much consideration for how I would then implement it in Source. When it came time to make this was probably one of the biggest struggles of all of these test chambers after the computer overheating issues. It's a little hard to see, but right there, you can kind of see it reflecting light because there is a glass panel in front of each of these lights, since they're essentially just 6 little light bulbs embedded in the sides of the cube. That is using the same material that the original portal gun uses on the little glass chamber. However, this fancy dynamic shadow, props that have anything translucent just automatically do not have shadows. So I had to make the glass into a separate model. However, I then had the issue where if you did this, the glass would stay in place, but the cube would go behind you like how cubes normally do. So I also had to make the cube into a separate model. So there are now 3 entities here. A cube, like the actual prop_weighted_cube that you interact with, which has no model, or no visible model at least, it's just a physics model. Then a prop dynamic, which has the wood and leather and all. And then the glass, which also makes it so that when you do this happens, which is kind of frustrating. Another irritating issue that it has is, because of this, when you put it into a portal, the cube gets cut off. I do not know how to fix this. It is really not great, and yeah, I think it speaks for itself how this is not the best. However, there are more problems. You see how it is casting an orange light on the scene. More of a yellow, actually. Should probably make it more orange. That was also a struggle, since the light_dynamic, which is different from the projector texture, there are 2 different types of dynamic lights in Source. It has this issue where, in the shadows, the cube will be somewhat weirdly lit. So I tried to have there be 6 individual lights on each corner on each face of the cube. However, that had the problem of whenever you picked it up, the lights would start violently flickering. So after testing, I found that you can only have like 4 dynamic lights move at a time. And that was just bewildering to me. So I had to settle for 1 light and then make everything very well lit so that that issue in the dark wasn't as apparent, but there are obviously still places where it is apparent. But to compensate, I added these little billboards to kind of make it look like it's glowing. It's not the best, but it's enough. Oh god, I've been complaining about the cube for a long time. Also, you can't normally change the model of a prop_weighted_cube, since there are just a couple of drop downs you select, and then the engine will pick the model and skin it all for you, which is useful when you just want a normal cube. But when you want to customize it like this, then you have to learn that apparently there's a whole scripting language for Source games called VScript, and then you have to figure out how to even implement the script onto something. And then, since I very much struggled to figure this out, I went through the files of a mod called Portal Stories Mel that I recommend playing. It's very hard, unless you pick the story mode, in which case you get screwed up loading screens. And I kind of copied their script to change something's model, but just changed the file path. The script is even still called the same thing. I admit to stealing it, but it works. However, if it's a model that the engine, or if it's a model that you're trying to give to something that isn't already in the map, then the game will just crash. So I don't remember exactly where, but somewhere in this map there's just an invisible barrier that's the size of a cube. I don't remember where it is. I think that covers all of the difficulties about creating a stupid cube. So about the actual level, I made this very grand opening with a projected texture and all. If you somehow manage to lose the cube, oh yeah, I have to complain about the cube more. So because of all of the intricacies and how the cube actually works, if this cube were to be destroyed, then be respawned with a normal box spawner, you wouldn't be able to get it back unless you do some even more complex script stuff. I don't know. And so in the original game, if you lost the cube, say like when you go down this hallway, these stairs will pop out so you can jump up without the cube. But if you get the cube up here and then walk back down, you'll be soft locked. And the game has a ton of confusing, complex trigger stuff throughout this whole chamber to try and prevent soft locks. I took the easy way out. There's a button, and if the cube is outside of a certain range, then it'll disappear and then teleport back up there, except sometimes it doesn't work and I need to fix it. I'm finding all sorts of these issues. Why don't these issues ever surface when I'm actually testing? Okay, I will be needing the cube. So in a previous video, I mentioned upgrading my instances throughout the project. This was an instance that I had to upgrade for this specific sphere, the energy pellet, since this is a very long hallway, and it has to get across that whole hallway, and then energy pellets get life back when they go through a portal. But it was still really tight and borderline impossible to complete either of these puzzles without just waiting for a good cycle. So I upgraded the instance to allow a couple of parameters on the pellets to be adjusted per instance, so I can have each pellet launcher have the exact same settings for the pellets that the originals had. Currently only this chamber and the next one have those settings figured out, but I will be going back to the previous ones and adjusting those values. One puzzle that has suffered a little bit here is this one. It's even more frustrating than it was originally. You just kind of have to hit it and then hope that it bounces in, which kind of happened in the recording. So once you get all three of those down, then you can go through here, enter this very special room with a caution thing, and I completely changed how the incinerator works for my own personal gain. Originally there was a button that opened a door to another button that would open the incinerator, and then you get the cube off the first button and drop it in the incinerator. But I went with something a bit more cinematic, where you place the cube there and it still makes you press a button, and then the cube leaves, goes away into the fire, and you can see the dynamic light. This hurt to make. I know I said that it deserves this earlier, but it still hurt to make. So to actually make it, this was a bit of a struggle, since I knew I wanted the cube to be locked onto that platform when you put it near it. I tried to think of other instances of this in source games, and I immediately thought of the battery puzzles from Half-Life 2, so I did some research into how they work, and that was entirely unsuccessful. And I messed around a ton with doing those sorts of things, since like none of them worked. It must be a Portal 2 thing with how the cubes work. However, I then realized that I could just, because of the confusingness of how the cube works, with how everything is separate from the actual physical object, you could just teleport everything else here and then destroy the actual cube. And it worked. So the actual cube is destroyed as soon as you put it there, and then the visible stuff is destroyed later. I also forgot to add fire sounds. I need to add fire sounds. So yeah, that was testing sphere number 6. And in the next video, it will be the final test sphere, which will have chamber 18 in the original numbering, which is now chamber 19 because I moved some stuff around. Goodbye.